Hey, CJN podcast listeners, Michael Fraiman here, executive producer. I wanted to share that the CJN has earned 6 Simon Rock Hour Awards this month, the Jewish Pulitzers, as some folks call them. We took home awards for magazine writing and design, and for feature stories on a Holocaust music project, BDS on Canadian campuses, and 4 women who discovered they were sisters in their golden years, thanks to 23andMe. But we can't create award-winning journalism without your help. If you value independent Jewish journalism, please consider supporting us today at thecjn.ca/donate.
You know, these are the literary gatekeepers who are, of course, long known as basically cowardly. They chase trends, and this is the trend.
Hi, I'm Phoebe Maltz Bovy, and you're listening to The Jewish Angle, a podcast from the Canadian Jewish News. PEN America, the free expression organization, is the latest arts-related group to fracture over Israel stuff. Probably the latest. There are a lot of these incidents, and by the time you hear this episode, all the remaining arts organizations that had not yet devolved in this way probably will have done so I should not have actually said the latest. The PEN story, in brief, is that the group put out a report about the shunning of Jewish and Israeli authors, which in turn prompted the group's then president to resign. The group itself then put out a response statement following all of this drama, which walked a line between standing by the report, which it did, and insisting to all who would listen that the organization itself has an impeccable track record of doing things like calling Israel's actions in Gaza genocide and generally engaging in pro-Palestine activism. Whether all of these attempts perhaps to please everybody pleased anybody is its own question, as is the state of Jewish literature in North America and perhaps even beyond today. Here to discuss this is Hal Niedzviecki. Hal is a Toronto author and commentator, and listeners may remember him from his 2024 Bonjour High appearance, where we discussed the collapse of Broken Pencil, his magazine about zines. Hal, welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be back. Sort of. since we only come back, we only reconnect when it's time to discuss another cultural boycott of the Jewish people. But hey, at least we have each other.
Exactly. I mean, that's kind of the theme of it all. So I wanted to ask, were you surprised to see all of this shaking down as it did at PEN?
I wasn't surprised at all. The only thing that surprised me was that they released a report, if you could call it a report, a sort of light article about the plight of Jewish and Israeli writers at all. That was the surprise for me. The rest of it was fairly predictable.
So what did you make then? That was actually, you anticipated my second question was going to be, were you surprised the report even existed? Because I, for one, was a bit surprised the report even existed. But what did you make of that? So there are these 2 documents we're talking about, really. There's the initial report, and then by talking about, I don't mean, we're not doing a Talmudic study of these documents, but these are going to be what we refer to. That first report and then the second, the statement, these are authored by different people, but all coming from this organization. What did you make of the report, the first one?
Well, the report itself is a very wishy-washy document that just reading it made my blood boil. So it's not like I was thinking, oh, this is an amazing, defense of the Jewish writer in the diaspora or in Israel. Not at all. The first page, if you want to call it that, or through the introduction, immediately, announces the genocide and the horrors of Israel's war in Gaza. And then it goes on to talk about the harassment. There's an entire paragraph devoted to the harassment of Palestinian writers and how they are being attacked and deplatformed. For a report that is supposed to be about Jewish writers being canceled and boycotted, there's a lot of throat clearing right off the bat. And then it finally gets to the meat of the matter, which, it says some good things and some true things about how Jews are being pushed to the sidelines in the arts and specifically the publishing industry. But it also takes some weird tangents, such as, well, maybe it's just tastes are changing. And I'm sorry, Jewish writers have been prominent in literature in America for a very long time. Tastes are not. It's not a matter that tastes are changing, and all of a sudden people are like, "Oh, I don't like the way the Jew expresses herself in this romance novel." That's good. That's gotta. So it's a disappointing document. And the only thing that we can sort of give it credit for is that it somehow wended its way through the woke universe to actually be released.
Yeah, I mean, I had so many thoughts about it when reading it. I mean, obviously, like the first was the, narcissistic one of, hey, the Jewish angle is linked to in this, which I was not expecting from PEN America, but indeed, because Meg Keane had come on this podcast to talk about this topic, which she hadn't really been openly discussing before, I don't think. So this was why that episode was so relevant. So that was exciting. But indeed, it did seem a bit, to me, discussing free expression as it pertains to Palestinians, it seems like that's a valid subject in its own right, but to bring it up in this context, I thought was a problem because that's not really the subject at hand. And then this question of tastes changing, I found very interesting because the analogy, is it that Jewish writers are one sort of marginalized group, or is it more that Jewish writers are kind of, in a sense, in this place that like the white male writer, straight white male, whatever writer was in the 2010s, of this kind of a group sort of authors assumed to have already said enough, and being kind of like, I don't want to hear more from them sort of thing. So it's like this weird, I mean, I don't think it's either of these. I think it's a third thing. But I thought this thing about tastes changing, your reaction and Meg Keane's reaction, mine was maybe very slightly different, but it was just that I kind of think there is something about all of this where trends are sort of mixed up with politics in a confusing way, where I don't know when a literary gatekeeper is saying no to a Jewish work, how much is that they think this is actually helping Palestinians? Side note, I don't think it is, but whatever, I don't know, maybe they think it is. I don't know how much is that they are making a kind of cold business decision about what sells in this market, which is what publishing is all about doing, right? But I wanted to ask, though, about the report itself and its findings. Were you, I feel like I know the answer to this, but whatever, maybe our listeners don't. Were you aware of things like this happening? Or were you shocked to know these things are happening?
Right. I mean, obviously, you know what I'm going to say, which is it's already happened to me and other people that I'm aware of. I was not shocked at all. There were a few nuggets in there that I was like, wow, like Etgar Keret, who's the sort of the golden boy of Israeli writing in America. Everyone loves Etgar. And for him to come out and say, well, I'm not getting bookings because I'm Israeli. And he's a longtime peace advocate and overall mensch in an indisputably left-wing way. So for him to come out and say, like, I'm being affected, that to me was really fascinating. And so there were a few nuggets that surprised me, but overall, this is the story of the Jewish writer's plight in the post-October 7th world. It's a not so silent moratorium in the fact that, as you yourself have experienced, if a book by a Jewish writer accidentally does slip through, people will immediately go and start, screaming about how is this Zionist being allowed to publish, blah blah blah. So I don't know about the silent part. It's not silent at all. It's disgustingly in the open. It's just anti-Semitic, revolting nonsense. And when you look at this idea that, oh, maybe tastes have changed, uh, these are the literary gatekeepers who are, of course, long known as basically cowardly. They chase trends, and this is the trend. They're not chasing. Um, a taste, because Jewish writers are not one voice. Jewish writers range from the surreal short, peace positive vignettes of an Edgar Carrot to vociferous defenses of Israeli strategy and to a book about gardening. There's no Jewish taste that you can say nobody wants to read this anymore.
Well, I would push back a little bit against that. I wish I didn't. I wish there was no reason to, but there have been these, and this comes up in the report, the mass panning of a book by a Jewish writer, these, online lists of like, is your fave a Zionist or whatever, and I think even if in a sort of like, blind audition type context, there's no reason that Jewish authored work wouldn't be as popular as it ever was. In an anti-Semitic climate, Jewish writing is less popular because people are more anti-Semitic. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that's an
but that's
incorrect
not taste, right? Like that's
business
not
decision.
It might be a business decision, but it's not a matter of taste. It's not.
Right.
We put this out to the public, and
it's
the
not
public,
an artistic decision.
Exactly. It's not a. It's a
right.
Quasi political decision. And I'm not even sure it's a business decision because it's hard to say that a bunch of fake 1-star reviews is going to necessarily sink a book. In some cases, that can give a book a tremendous boost if you're able to say, this group is attacking me, everyone rally around me. That can help a book.
I mean, what I've found, so I've come to this topic in a few different ways. One is that I review books for the CJN and specifically for Scribe Quarterly, our print magazine. And part of that involves like just looking to see what are all the new books being published in Canada within a certain set of months. And when I started doing this in, I guess, 2022, not a problem to, like there were just so many that the thought that I would request a galley because a book was Jewish was unthinkable because there were just so many, I could just completely, my eyes would glaze over most because there, a few would jump out at me. I'd get galleys and pick, from that. And then more recently, it really has been like, okay, there's the book about Jews. Can I summon enough interest in that? And it's been a different thing. And that it's also like, it's hard to sort of, but then what happens because I'm looking at these month, like everything, right? Because there's no filter that works, right? So I'm just looking at everything, trying to not see like something that's a textbook, but whatever, And
it's a textbook on math,
is a lot
but I'll review it. at least exactly. It's written by a cat.
But yeah, basically what I would find though is that there was a ton of literature about Gaza, about Palestinian identity, about like Palestinian poetry, about Israeli misdeeds, often Israeli authored books like this. So it's not, so like I remember thinking just in a very sort of cold and practical sense that it's a shame that's not what I'm trying to find books about because boy, would I have a lot of possibilities to choose from. And then I'm like, as I'm, reading the summary of some like romance novel about, like trying to figure out, is Eisenberg a Jewish name, whatever it is. And I'm thinking like, what am I even doing here? Because it just seemed like I was digging and digging and digging. So that's where this all became apparent to me. I'm not Meg Keane. I have not like systematically studied this, but that just became clear. But then it was much more recently that I realized that as an author myself, I'm also in this world. And it was getting like when I had this excerpt in The Walrus and had these, which brings me to my next question, which is not a personal one, but rather a national one, which is what differences you think there are between the Canadian and American contexts here? Because PEN America, right?
Yes.
What's happening to the north?
I mean, first of all, it should be noted there is a PEN Canada, and they have said nothing, as far as I can tell, on the plight of Jewish writers in Canada. Plight might be a little bit too strong a word. So, I'd be interested to see if they have anything to say on these matters. The Canadian context generally follows the American. Most of our publishing is dominated by companies based in New York that make most of their money by bringing in books published in the U.S. by American authors. So you automatically have, the Canadian independent publishing accounts for something pathetic like 4% of Canadian sales. So you have this flow into Canada, and that flow is heavily affected by what is decided in New York. So if New York is boycotting American Jewish writers or Israeli writers, Canada is effectively boycotting them too. In those few cases where there are small presses that are publishing Jewish writers, that's great. But we also have to face the fact that most of the small presses in Canada are heavily left aligned. Many have put out what I consider to be extremely anti-Jewish, even anti-Semitic, and certainly heavily anti-Israel posts on social media. And so the prospects are not very good for the Canadian writer in Canada, with a few exceptions. For the Canadian Jewish writer in Canada. And of course, there's always the proviso that if you fall over backwards screaming about how much you hate Israel and how much you are trying to stop the genocide, that can give you a little bit of extra cred with these pretty much far left publishers that dominate what is left of the Canadian independent publishing scene.
I don't even know. I mean, it was interesting just when I was, bleak, but interesting when I was trying to do timelines for all of this, because I really do think, as much as this is like personal trivia, who cares if you're not me, the fact that I got a book deal, specifically July 2023, really was this like the moment that could have happened, because it was this moment when publishing became a little bit less kind of, hyper woke, I would say, or whatever, willing to consider something that might make somebody upset, even if it is actually pretty progressive, but whatever, more willing to take a risk. But also because it was July 2023, nobody cared that I was Jewish. Nobody, this did not, I don't think this was like a thing. Nobody cared. I mean, this is something that I've written about also with the CJN, that like there was this big Judy Blume revival in early 2023. And could that have even happened a bit later? I mean, it's hard to say, because I think people would have been like, well, wait, what does Judy Blume think about Israel? And insofar as I've looked into it, not a heck of a lot. This is not really her area. So then what I did find, though, was like when I was looking for like where to do a launch, I was thinking, well, okay, there's a bookstore near me. It seems very nice, but like I shop there all the time, but it is, all in for Palestine. Are they going to be like Googling me and deciding that I'm not enough in that direction for their purposes? They do stock my book, which I was sort of,
Yeah.
props to them.
Well, they might not. They might not have
they
gotten
also
the memo. Maybe they didn't
well,
get
they
the
don't. It's
measurements
not
of your
prominently
head.
displayed, but exactly. Well, I don't know. No, but I mean, I think like I think they are. I think they are maybe more open-minded than I'm giving them credit for if they would do that. But something though that I've not really seen much discussed, and that I did bring up when I wrote a column about this whole Penn incident, is that there have been all these efforts to help Jewish writers, and they've focused on boosting like the Jewish arts, like Jewish literature that's on Jewish themes, where a character goes to synagogue, a character has a formative experience in Israel, something, there's got to be something Jewish in there, and it's not incidental. And I understand where this is coming from, and I don't think it's a bad thing that these efforts exist, but I think conceptually, like, it puts writers like me, and I'm hardly the only one who would fall into this category, maybe you would place yourself in this category, writers who do not necessarily write on Jewish topics, it puts us in a certain bind where it's like, are we going to change topics so that the one table that'll have us in the bookstore will have us? Or can we write about what we want to write about without erasing who we are and without taking on some kind of specific far left political advocacy that is either not our politics, or we're just not political in that way.
Yeah. No, I mean, I hear what you're saying. My own writing background is I did not start writing at all. I didn't write about being Jewish at all. I wrote a bunch of bizarre novels, and then I wrote a bunch of books about pop culture and technology, and none of that stuff had anything to do with my Jewishness. And nobody cared, nor should they have cared, obviously, because it had nothing to do with it. And I published with Random House, I published with Penguin, I published with McClellan and Stewart, and no one ever asked me if I was Jewish. Now it's different.
And now all of those things I think have merged, because I think I just published with all three that you named, but it was only one publisher. Yes.
That's right. They're all the same. They're all the same now, which is also a problem, but one for a future discussion. So the truth is, we're starting to get into more interesting territory for me, which is what is the solution to this? Because I don't think that, like I said before, I don't think it's sort of a passing trend where it's like, okay, we published 14 books about white fragility and the horrors of racism. Now we can move on. I think the Jewish problem, as we like to put it way back from back in the European days, the Jewish problem, it's gonna last longer. It may last for the rest of our lives and our careers. So it's a problem, and I think the solution for me is twofold. I think one, we need a kind of parallel system of grants that does support Jewish writers and artists in Canada more robustly, and is not so much concerned about overt Jewish content, and everyone doesn't have to be having the crisis around their bar mitzvah or retracing their grandmother's experiences of the Holocaust. Some people can just be writing on mainstream non-Jewish related topics, and yet their Jewish voice comes through. And that's certainly been my experience, is that no matter how much I have tried in the past maybe to outrun my Jewishness, in the end my Jewish voice comes through. And I love that now. At one point or another, I might have been like, no, I don't want to be a Jewish writer. Now I don't care. But it's a voice, and it's a personality, and it's a background. And we have to recognize that it doesn't matter if you're writing about the Talmud, the Holocaust, or the last ditch efforts of the few straight women who remain to validate their their preferences. We can look at other ways to do this. So, for instance, if there is a press, say an independent Canadian press that wants to start a line of Jewish authors, maybe we support that. Maybe there's a grant they can go to and say, hey, we're going to publish Jews. And we'll say, great, we'll give you $5,000 a book. Let's just be very pragmatic and figure out ways to get those voices out there, because your average book in Canada is going to published by these independent presses is selling 800 copies. What if we guarantee 3,000? Let's be a little more out of the box and flexible.
Hal, thank you so much for coming on The Jewish Angle. While I do have, as always, many, many more thoughts, I will, in the interest of our podcast listeners and your own day, say thank you. Where can we find you?
I'm currently hiding out up north. I can't give you my location due to my many enemies. No, I'm on Substack. I'm actually currently in the midst of publishing a mini post-October 7th memoir that I cut out of another book that will come out in about a year. I'll keep you posted. But it's so look for me on Substack. If you
please
go
do.
to I'm Special. Hello, I'm Special. That's my Substack. And look for news about this book that I've been working on for a few years. It's about my first cousin, who is a full-fledged gangster in the Montreal mob. How about that for Jewish content? So look out. I'll keep you posted.
It certainly counts. All right. Thanks so much, Hal.